They told you it was an accident. A random backstage scuffle. A blurry shadow in the hallway. But what if I told you that one mystery attacker didn't just take out a superstar, they changed the entire course of professional wrestling forever? Because the night the lights flickered in the arena and chaos broke loose, wrestling stopped feeling safe. It was during an episode of WWE Raw when the unthinkable happened. A top babyface had just finished cutting a promo, the crowd electric, signs waving, cameras flashing. Then suddenly blackout. When the lights came back on, he was laid out cold in the middle of the ring. No music, no Titantron, no reveal, just silence and confusion. Backstage footage later showed a hooded figure slipping through the corridors. Security conveniently malfunctioned. Commentators acted shocked. Management promised answers. But here's the part that still makes fans furious to this day. There was never a satisfying payoff. For weeks, the mystery attacker's storyline dragged on. Wrestlers accused each other. Alliances crumbled. Tag teams imploded. Fans speculated nonstop. Was it a jealous rival? A returning legend? A new debuting monster? Viewers dissected every frame like it was the Zapruder film. Let me ask you something. If you were booking this angle, would you reveal the attacker quickly or stretch it out for months? Drop your answer in the comments. Because stretching it out is exactly what they did. Ratings dipped. The crowd grew restless. Every week, the commentators teased a major development. Every week, we got another vague clue. A boot print. A distorted voice. A camera glitch. It felt like wrestling had turned into a bad detective show. And then the reveal. Not a shocking return. Not a mind-blowing swerve. Not even a believable motive. Just a mid-card heel who had barely been featured on television. The arena didn't erupt. It deflated. You could literally feel the disappointment through the screen. Fans expected a mastermind. Instead, they got a rushed explanation about wanting opportunities. No layered storytelling. No long-term brilliance. Just a flat ending that killed momentum for everyone involved. And here's where it gets worse. The original victim? He lost steam completely. Before the attack, he was white-hot. Merch flying off shelves, crowd chants shaking the building. After the reveal, he was stuck in a cold feud that nobody cared about. Careers were derailed. Tag divisions were broken. Storylines were abandoned. The locker room chemistry on-screen felt forced and unnatural. This wasn't just a bad angle. It was a disaster that exposed how fragile wrestling storytelling can be. Think about legendary mystery angles done right. When Triple H was revealed as the mastermind behind Chaos years ago, it elevated his aura. When Stone Cold Steve Austin was run over in that infamous parking lot storyline, fans stayed hooked because the payoff mattered. But this felt like panic booking. And here's the uncomfortable question. Was there ever even a plan? Or did they start the angle with no idea who the attacker was? Be honest. Have you ever felt like wrestling insults your intelligence with storylines like this? Because fans don't forget. The fallout from that disaster led to creative shakeups. Writers were reportedly reassigned. Long-term arcs were scrapped in favor of safe booking. Instead of risky storytelling, we got repetitive rematches and predictable finishes. And that's the true damage. When a mystery angle fails, it teaches companies to stop taking risks. It conditions them to play it safe. And wrestling without risk? It becomes sterile. Now imagine if the attacker had been a returning megastar. Imagine the crowd explosion. Imagine the merchandise spike. Imagine the WrestleMania level buildup it could have sparked. Instead, we got a shrug. So, here's another question for you. What's the worst wrestling storyline payoff you've ever seen? And did it make you stop watching for a while? Moments like this test loyalty. They divide fan bases. They ignite comment sections. They make you argue with your friends at 2 a.m. about what could have been. And that's why this mystery attacker disaster still stings. Because it had everything it needed to be iconic. The atmosphere. The intrigue. The speculation. But without execution, even the best premise collapses. Wrestling thrives on emotional investment. When you feel betrayed, not by a heel, but by the booking, it hits differently. And maybe that's the real mystery. Not who the attacker was, but how such a promising storyline was allowed to fall apart so spectacularly. If you were in charge, would you reboot that angle today with a different ending? Or is some damage just impossible to undo? Sound off below. I'm reading every comment. Because in wrestling, mysteries are powerful. But mishandled mysteries? They don't just ruin a night. They can ruin an era. And here's the part nobody likes to admit. It wasn't just one bad reveal. It was the moment fans realized the curtain had slipped. For decades, companies like WWE built their empire on one simple promise. If you stay invested, we'll reward you. The slow burn will matter. The clues will connect. The payoff will justify the wait. That night broke that trust. Because once the mystery attacker was revealed as just another guy chasing opportunity, the illusion cracked. The locker room didn't feel dangerous anymore. It felt directionless. Like even the writers were waiting to see what would happen next. And wrestling cannot survive on "we'll figure it out later." Think about how powerful long-term storytelling can be when it's handled right. The higher power saga that eventually tied back to Triple H reshaped his entire aura. The hit-and-run mystery involving Stone Cold Steve Austin became must-see television because every breadcrumb led somewhere intentional. Those angles didn't just fill time. They created legacy moments. This one? It created hesitation. After that failed reveal, you could feel it in the audience reactions. When the lights flickered in later episodes, instead of excitement, there was skepticism. When commentators teased a game-changing twist, fans rolled their eyes. The emotional currency had been devalued. And that's devastating in a business built entirely on anticipation. Because wrestling is a pact between performer and viewer. You suspend disbelief. You invest emotionally. You argue online. You buy the shirt. You chant the name. But if the destination doesn't matter, why take the journey? What's fascinating is how one mishandled storyline can ripple outward. Main event pushes cooled off. Mid-card feuds became filler. Even pay-per-views felt like placeholders instead of climaxes. It's not that the roster lacked talent. It's that the narrative spine snapped. And once a company gets scared of backlash, you start seeing this safe era. Rematches. 50-50 booking. Surprise roll-ups. No bold swerves unless they're completely telegraphed. Risk creates magic. But fear creates predictability. Imagine if that mystery attacker had been a returning icon, or a faction reveal that reshaped the hierarchy, or even a carefully built mid-carder whose descent into obsession had been layered for months. Same premise, different execution, entirely different history. Because sometimes a single storyline is a fork in the road. One direction leads to a boom period. The other leads to creative stagnation. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Fans would have forgiven almost anything if it felt planned. It wasn't the identity of the attacker that hurt most. It was the sense that nobody steering the ship knew the destination. That's why this angle still gets brought up in forums and podcasts. Not because it was shocking, but because it was squandered potential. And in wrestling, wasted potential stings more than a clean loss ever could. So now let me flip it back to you one last time. If you were head of creative today, would you dare attempt another long-form mystery angle? Would you map out the ending first? Or would you avoid the risk entirely? Because history shows us something important. Mysteries don't ruin eras. Bad payoffs do. And the next time the lights go out in that arena, fans will be watching. Not just for who's standing in the ring, but for whether the company learned its lesson.